He has worked with Asia Brown Boveri Limited, ABB Limited between 1986 and 1991 in the area of installation and commissioning of process control systems and DCS in thermal power plants. He has worked with Tata Steel Jamshedpur between 1991 and 1999 in varied disciplines like production, R&D and products. He has joined DRDO in year 1999 and was working with Advanced Systems Lab, Hyderabad. Since then shifted to Research Center Imarat Asriya, Hyderabad in the month of January this year. Area of specialization are electrical integration of long-range missile systems. He has played a significant role in the development of flight trials of Agni series of missiles and their operationalization. Design and development of his as a technology director, electromechanical actuation systems and autopilot control systems lab at RCI Hyderabad. He has some awards also to his credit. Agni Award for Excellence in Self-Reliance in the year 2002 and DRDO Award for Path-Breaking Research or Outstanding Technology Development in the year 2007. So we welcome you to start.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Mangu Garu. Yesterday evening, I received a call from him at about 7:30, asking for the fact whether I would be in a position to deliver this talk before you today or not. So it's a matter of fact that it is, I cannot refuse him in the first place. It's such a long association with this department, Dr. Satish Kumar Garu and Dr. Prasad. It was a very fruitful and exciting engagement with this department, at least for me during the last many years. And thanks, madam, for giving this introduction. As you heard from I'm sorry. So I briefly repeat what I said just now, that thanks to Dr. Mangu for having invited me to this talk today. And you just now heard my biodata. So my first assignment was with the Asia Brown Boveri Limited, ABB. This is a well-known electrical engineering multinational firm based out of Sweden, Stockholm being its headquarters. And thereafter, my next assignment was with a very reputed, those days it was reputed, I'm not sure whether it is reputed today or not, it was Tata Steel Jamshedpur. And the year 99, I thought of shifting over to the native state, and what would be better than getting an opportunity to work in Hyderabad. I shifted to DRDO. It's almost 20 years now that I am with DRDO. And my experience is based on the long-range missile systems. First of all, I would like to give you a brief on my earlier two placements, that is ABB and Tata Steel. What were the technologies those days? What has changed? And what is likely to happen in future? Would that be all right? I'll take about just 10 minutes to cover these two before I go through my regular presentation, which is about 30 to 40 minutes. So starting with the first assignment, as I said, way back in the year 1987, when I got this first placement, the company asked me to take the first available flight to their headquarters in Stockholm. It was winter, 5 feet of snow in that cold country, and just being out of the college, it was a challenge. I'm sure most of the people in the audience today are young. Maybe you have just finished your college or going through your post-graduation or things like that. I can see some senior members also. So I would just like to share a few thoughts about the same. The purpose of having gone there was to get myself familiarized with the operation, maintenance, commissioning and installation of power plants. You see, as a matter of fact, when they were taking me around, you will also know that ABB is a manufacturer of robos. ABB robos are world famous. The orange colored robos, which are widely used in the automotive industries and many other industries today. And there was a demonstration which was given where a robo which was standing was holding an egg, a large sized egg. And it was holding in one of its arms, probably its left hand. And the arm was almost like 160, 170 degrees angle to drop the egg. And before the egg could crash into the ground, the robo arm went down and picked it up without cracking the shell. Can a human do that? Maybe once. It's possible if he is having a very fast response. A human can do it once, maybe twice. But this machine has done it without any error for 10 times. The same piece of egg was lifted, dropped, picked it up, just about a couple of inches above the ground. Again lifted, dropped. Not a scratch on the shell. When was it? 1987, 31 years ago. What were the technologies involved? Of course, electrical engineering, the control systems, the motors, the prime movers, actuation systems, sensors, how accurate they were at that point of time. Technology has only improved. We have incorporated intelligence, we have incorporated learning. It can do many more intelligent activities today, and that is what is being implemented in the industry, what we know as machine learning and artificial intelligence. I think my next speaker or one of the next speakers is going to talk about it. I would only say that once you get into a powerhouse control room, the maze of control panels that you see is simply overwhelming. So many push buttons, so many lights, displays, recorders, charts, this, that. For a newcomer, it is just confusing. You just don't know where is the beginning, where is the end. Over a period of time, things have changed. The involvement of an operator has slowly come down. Today we see most of the places, it is very minimal displays. What you have is computer screens, which in technical terms is now today called HMIs. Have you heard about that? MMIs, HMIs, human-machine interface and man-machine interface. These are some of the technical terms that are used. The intervention of the shift operator has reduced a lot. There were 6 to 7 people who used to sit in the control room those days to monitor various activities which started with raw material handling, boiler operation, turbine operation, generator operation, switchgear, this, that, cooling systems. But today it is just 1 or 2. The rest of the things are taken up by the computer. There are intelligent programs that are residing therein. If there is a situational demand, it is a decision which is taken first by the computer and then it is corroborated by the person who is sitting before the screen and the decision is implemented. In future, who knows? There may be control systems so advanced that the entire powerhouse would be run by just computers. Many of you agree to that? Planes can be flown without a pilot. Of course, we have had 2, in the media there were reports that passenger planes have been crashed one after the other in the last 6 months. 2 crashes have happened. I'll talk about it later, but then just to bring out the point that emerging technologies, that is the topic of the day, where is it going to take us? Please don't be scared that your jobs are going to be taken away. Your work profile is what is going to shift from a field activity to an activity which makes the computer learn. So that is what is going to happen in future. I had been asking questions on power generation, transmission and distribution when I was here last time also. Today we have a wide network of power distribution systems, whether it is HVDC. Yes, I forgot to tell you that ABB is in a big way into HVDC. At one point of time it was. In 1987, there was a big project that was getting executed, HVDC I mean to say, 700 kV between Rihand and Delhi. Almost 2,000 kilometers, more than 1,500 kilometers I think. And BHEL engineers were undergoing training at ABB to handle these systems. Each of the SCR and thyristor that was used in the string was this size, a Tiffin box. But today what is the size of the same switching device? 1/4, small one. Why? How the change has come? Because of new generation materials, new technologies and things like that. Why I talked about HVDC is because it is a system which is much better than the conventional system when you have to transfer bulk power from point A to point B, which is long distance. Now, in sequence, is it possible to transmit power without cables or wires, without transmission lines? Is it possible? This is a challenge before electrical engineers today, all of you. How many say yes? Please put up your hands. Yeah, there is one, only one. It is not possible. All of you say it is not possible. Can we bring about a revolution wherein bulk power transfer, whether it's bulk power or whatever power, happens wireless? How many of us in our own lifetime we have seen telephones working on lines only? Has it not happened that it has changed over to wireless, completely wireless without wires? It is a fact today. Why not power? What is the limitation? What do you think is the limitation? Anybody? Anybody? Any answers? Guess. 2010 Nobel Prize was won for a discovery which was made in the field of electrical engineering. Are you aware? Any one of you know what is that? The discovery of a material called graphene. You know what is graphene? It's a wonderful, wonderful material. It can bring about a revolution in the field of electrical electronics. Two professors working in the University of Manchester, UK, were the ones who were awarded Nobel Prize for discovery of graphene. Now, another challenge which comes to my mind in the field of power generation is, when you go to the generator room, let us say 450 megawatt or a 600 megawatt generator may be bigger than the size of the room. Have you seen anybody gone to a powerhouse, NTPC or whatever, Reliance? Why? Why should it occupy that space? Why can't it occupy 1/4 of that or 1/10 or maybe the size of this table, 600 megawatts? Is it possible? How many of you say it is possible? Yeah, there is one. Very good. Anyone else? Again, I keep asking, if it is not possible, where is the limitation? Is it not a challenge before you, all of you electrical engineers, to get to a point where you bring down the size of electrical machines, I would say, to a smaller size? What is the design challenge? Anybody? You heard of what is called superconductivity? You heard about it? What is that? Infinite current. That is the limitation. If you have something which can take very large quantities of current at room temperature, you can design machines whatever smaller. Theoretically, they can be very, very small. But then, superconductivity, the research has been going on for decades, if not years. People have demonstrated at sub-zero temperatures, minus 250, minus 230, keeps coming down. Now it is closer to minus. Yeah. I will shift over to the other aspect, process industry. Process industry also has many challenges. One example I'll give you as a control system engineer, what exactly I have faced working in the process. You know, the steel industry, Tata Steel also makes pipes. Pipes are of various kinds. There is the sheet metal is bent and it is welded. In some cases, welding is not allowed because of high temperature and high pressure, whatever medium flows through the pipes. So seamless pipes are required. Oil and gas industry uses them in large quantities. Seamless pipes. How it is made? They take a billet. It is a metal piece. You know, there is a rammer which comes and pushes it in the center, makes a hole, and then it is drawn. The billet is drawn into a pipe, cut in pieces. There is no joint. But then if you have to test and find out that there are no defects, no cracks, it is all uniform. How do you do that without destroying? No destruction is allowed. Non-destructive testing of a pipe which is seamless. There are many methods. Ultrasonic testing. Defects, material defects, the most commonly used is ultrasonic method. Magnetostrictive method, using magnetism, using eddy current. These are the various techniques that are used. You know, when an aircraft lands, its landing gear is the one which takes the maximum load, hits, stresses. Maximum stress in the aircraft is taken by landing. So every time an aircraft lands, the rod which is connecting the landing gear is tested for fracture. So these are the techniques which are used to test. I don't know how many of you have noticed it. They take the the ultrasound device and takes it around and tests whether it is okay or not. This is for the safety. But then, when the tubes were tested, the challenge that was coming is there were some defects which were passing through inadvertently. If there are two defects in the tube, one was getting detected, the other was not getting detected. Things like that were happening. So the challenge was solved just by adjusting the sensitivity of the measurement device. Very, very simple. The operator who was using it is not aware. You give him the device, he just moves it around and then says, "Pass ho gaya sir." But then how does he know what the equipment is doing? If there is a large crack, it catches. But if there is a very miniature, minute crack, the sensitivity of the device is not high enough to locate this. So there were lots of experiments, do's and don'ts, a lot of lab tests happened. What is the right value of the sensitivity was set and it was done. Thereafter there were no complaints from the user. The second thing is, the second example which I would like to take is metallurgical industry also has a research wing, and more so in Tata Steel. Temperature control is a very important parameter when you do metallurgical research because it is molten metal and always about 1250 degrees centigrade because that is the melting point of steel, iron. How do you control precisely the temperature there? If you add some inclusions, like let us say magnesium, nickel, chromium, if you add, the temperature has to be right. Absolutely, if they want 1260, it has to be 1260. Is it possible to have a closed loop feedback control system to get to a temperature in a furnace exactly at that point, theoretically it is not possible. It is not possible because temperature is a slow varying parameter unless you use a T function. You know what is PID function? All of you must be knowing this. Yeah? PID? No? Proportional integral derivative. Most of you, when you apply this in a normal day-to-day control system activity, you use either P or I. Rarely and rarely people use P. But in this particular case, because the overwhelming parameter for temperature, T had to be made that much more prominent. And it was done. Simulations were done, repeated algorithms, repeated runs were given. 1260 plus minus 10 was achieved. It was reduced to plus minus 5. And in those days, it was a thing which was discussed. It's very difficult to control temperature. Do you have any questions before I shift to the topic? Anybody wants to ask something? The purpose of this is to make it more interesting because after lunch it is a difficult session. People generally find sleep. So, to make it more interesting, if you ask questions, it will be lively because others will pay attention to you as well, not just to me. Anything? Just one question. Anybody? Yeah.
You are saying power transfer through wireless medium,
Yeah.
but conversion equipment should be placed at each location.
The challenge is before all of you, including yourself. If you have to make it happen, have you seen an iPhone getting charged? Okay, only in the recent times. There is a disk kind of structure which you plug it and place the iPhone next to it. There is no contact. It gets charged. What is the transfer mode? Mode of transfer is wireless. It is wireless. However, the difference is there is a very small amount of power. But if you have a transmission line, there is bulk power. It's very large. When you can do small, can you migrate the same technology to a very large system? Is it possible? Must be. But why people have not been able to do it till today? Just see the face of the earth. No transmission lines. No things, no poles standing or crisscrossing and nothing. Yeah? Anything? You said something?
I think Tesla has tested it, no?
Still it is in the lab. Still it is in the lab. People are doing extensive tests. I would say, jokingly to all of you, there is a Nobel Prize waiting for anybody who commercializes.
It was intentionally stopped, I think so. In the initial days when Tesla was doing it.
There are drawbacks. There is a downside. But then, every downside can be overcome. Somebody who overcomes the downside is the one who is successful. Any other question before I move to this? All of you know what is Agni missile? Very much in the news only recently. A small tussle with our neighbor, and people talk that there were people talking about it. Two nuclear nations facing each other. What will happen? Supposing they drop nuclear bombs, whether we will be able to drop. All these things were discussed just recently. So this is what is available with us. Everybody knows. I don't have to tell you that there's no secret. This thing, that the missiles are there. They are nuclear equipped. They are ready. And if the armed forces are in need, can be used. This is what is Agni. The entire range that you can see. 15 minutes. 20 minutes. This entire range is Agni. So this is the one which started off early, that is in 1983 when Dr. Abdul Kalam shifted from ISRO to DRDO. He was at the helm. The two-stage, 1 meter diameter Agni 2 vehicle, which can go to 2000 kilometers range. Thereafter, we designed and developed in my own tenure. Our own team was actively involved in the design and development of Agni 1, which is a single-stage version with a payload. The black portion is the payload, which re-enters the atmosphere and then goes to the target. 700 to 1200 kilometers, just right for the adversary I talked about just now. 1200 to 700 to 1200 kilometers. Already made in numbers, deployed, given to the army, and our defense forces are trained to handle it independently. We don't have that. Agni 3 is a 2 meter diameter, two-stage vehicle with a payload. This is a much bigger payload. It can go to 3000 kilometers. Agni 4 is a very versatile new generation missile, again having two stages, can go up to 4000 kilometers. Agni 5 is the one which is the latest. This is having carbon composite technology. The rocket motor casing is carbon composite, it's not metal. Marathon steel is the one which is used for making conventional rocket motor casings. There is a company, there is a firm called Midani Mishra Dhatu Nigam Limited in Hyderabad. This is the only firm which can make metal casings for rocket motors. And our own lab, that is Advanced Systems Lab, has pioneered in the manufacture of carbon composite rocket motors. 3 times lighter in weight, 3 times faster to fabricate, cost 3 times less. This is the advantage of carbon composite casings. This can go up to 5000 kilometers. But why I brought out all these things is because control systems are extensively used here. Electrical technology is extensively used here. How it is used is what I am going to bring out in the next few slides.
Sir, only 5,000 kilometers range only we have. 20,000.
So we need more than 5,000 because these are the decisions which is taken at the highest level.
Okay.
There's a cabinet committee, just take it. There's a cabinet committee on defense which actually has a closed door meeting and they debate. The service chiefs are there, prominent people are inside. Once the decision is made there, the decision is conveyed to us that this is the activity which is given to you. These are the parameters which need to be met. You design the system and give it, and this is the time frame here. Earlier it was 6 years. Today they have brought it down to 3.5 years only.
Okay.
So we just need to make the system and deliver in 3.5 years, right from the drawing board to the first flight. Okay?
No, sir. What is the maximum range of missile over here?
It is 5,000.
5,000.
But it is very simple. If you put a 1,500 kg on the top,
Okay.
it will go to 5,000. If you put 500 kg, it is the energy. There is a fixed amount of energy which is there. You put a smaller payload.
But while testing, only 5,000 distance we test.
Very familiar diagram. Undergraduation textbooks you find this. So this is what is exactly present here. This is a typical system which I have taken. This is the control system here down below for the first stage control. There is a flex nozzle control. I will explain to you what is flex nozzle control. This is what is residing here. Then we have 2 other control systems when the black thing is coming back to hit the target. We have what is called a reaction control system and a re-entry control surface. Here is an aerodynamic surface. So there are 2 functions. Basically the thrust which is going down, if you vector the thrust, there is a direction which is given to the vehicle. Very simple. Another thing is, there are aerodynamic control surfaces. If the body is moving very fast in the atmosphere, there is friction. Air is, impinging on those surfaces. You move the surfaces, it will take some other direction. So these are the 2 means of control which is executed on a typical missile. The third type of control is the reaction control, which is in the upper reaches of the atmosphere. It uses the Newton's third law. You give a force and there is an opposite force equal. It's a reaction which comes. So a typical flow diagram, you have sensors, you have gyros, you have accelerometers, things like that which take up the body rates of the missile located somewhere in the payload. Then the sensors give input to navigation, which computes the body rates at that particular instant. That is the position, velocity and acceleration. The inputs are fed to a guidance system. It is on the onboard computer. The difference between the current position and the expected position in the trajectory is given out to the autopilot, which computes the commands which are given to the control system. And the control system corrects the trajectory to put it in the required path. So this is what happens. Again, a similar thing which is given in the control system terminology. We have an outer loop which is the navigation loop, intermediate loop which is the autopilot, and the inner loop which is the actuator control loop. You can see the bandwidths, lowest, lower and the highest. 0.2 Hz bandwidth, 1 Hz and 6 Hz. So this is what is the control function that is implemented on board. A very rudimentary diagram. You have the CG of the missile here, you have the nozzle here, there is a nozzle pivot point, and this is the moment arm. And if you want to turn this missile, you have to turn the nozzle to a particular degree to give it the direction, either in this direction or this direction, or in 360 degrees you can give it. So this is what is the computation which is important. See, in earlier days, when the electrical engineering was not so much evolved and the materials available was not of the highest category. Materials means materials which go into the making of motors, magnets. The soft core material was not that much advanced. Can anybody say that what is the maximum flux density that you can, without saturation, what is the maximum flux density a soft core material can take today? How much of Tesla? The one that we use is 2.6 Tesla. It's hyperco. It is a cobalt alloy, which is made only by one firm in the US. But earlier days, the ferrite-based technologies, CRGO, CR, the non-grain oriented or the grain oriented, was going only up to 1.5, 1.6. So today we have materials which can go up to 2.6 Tesla. Magnet materials, Alnico, ferrite magnets, magnets that are samarium based, they are all of the lower energy density category. Today we have gone to neodymium, iron boron, NdFeB. NdFeB can go to very high magnetic products, energy density products. You can go up to 40 to 45 megagauss Oersteds. That is the energy product. Now what is the BH curve? If you take the product of the X and Y in which the curve can fit in the operating zone, that gives you the energy product. BH, B into H, megagauss Oersteds. Because of the non-availability of systems that can deliver this force, it's a 10.5 ton actuation system. The force that is generated here is 10.5 ton. 10 years or 15 years ago, these materials were not available. The available batteries were not in a position to deliver the power. We necessarily had to go to a hydraulic system. Today it is not the case. Second stage is a smaller stage, so we have gone for a electromechanical system. Third stage is a still smaller stage. This is the nozzle, the cross section of the nozzle that you see here. And this is the actuation system which is actually either pushing it or pulling it. and this is the feedback element, that is the LVDT or the linear variable differential transform. You know what it is? Heard about this LVDT thing before? It's a linear displacement sensor. The hydraulic system, mechanical engineers will understand this figure much better. The electrical engineers will understand this figure much better. These are basically the same for hydraulic system. Very little electrical power to be handled as compared to the electromechanical system. Electromechanical system, we have huge batteries. You have a servo controller which also houses the inverter. I think Ravi Teja Garu, the next speaker, is going to talk about it. I will not cover much. Then we have the actuators. They work on PWM. We use either MOSFETs or IGBTs. And this is the signal flow. You have a DSP. This is 21062. It's now obsolete. The obsolescence rate of obsolescence is going very high. The device that is available today, 3 years from now, it won't be available. They don't support it. So your implementation, the components that you select, should also take care of the obsolescence. If there is an obsolescence, you must have a design feasibility. You can replace the device and seamless transfer from the old to the new configuration. Your software should be able to take care of it. Portability of your algorithm or the code should be in such a way that obsolescence of the device will not affect much in porting. A brief comparison, not very much. Hydraulic actuator, electromechanical actuator. Much lighter, much simpler, very reliable, rugged, no maintenance. You don't have to open the missile to see whether it is working or not. Missiles today are put in a canister. Canister is a huge tube with slit ends. There is a gas generator at the bottom. Gas generator ignites, missile is pushed up, first stage ignites in the air. That was not the case earlier. Today it is the case. So if that is the scenario, we necessarily have to have an electrical system which is maintenance free. Challenges, design challenges in high power electromechanical system, very self-defining. They have to deliver high torque, power to weight ratios have to be reasonably high. Safety and cost. As I said, we use NdFeB magnets, we use hyperco alloys, cobalt based alloys which are imported. All these things push up the cost. Battery also has a limitation. The energy density, the specific energy, all these things have a limitation. Today battery technology is evolving. We use lithium based thermal batteries, but it is only a single shot device. Once only you can use. Initiate, use it, that's all. And that is what we want, because missile is used only once. Corona is a challenge, because higher the reaches of the atmosphere you go, the dielectric strength of air goes down. Once the dielectric strength of the air goes down, the same voltage with the same gap starts discharging. There is short circuit. So you have to take adequate care in your design. If it exceeds something more than 150 volts, below 150 volts nothing happens. That's what literature tells us. Anything more than 150 volts DC, exceeding 150 volts DC, you need to have enough care in your design to take care of current discharge at higher altitudes. So all these are what it is, very simple, self-explanatory. Reliability is one consideration which is absolutely important when you design a system which is for aerospace application. So I will not take much time in covering all these things. These are all mechanical aspects. BLDC motors, brushless DC motors is the one which we actually use for this application. They are the prime movers. And brushless DC motor top speed characteristics is always a truncated triangle. It's a shape which is something like this. So we use the profiles, load profiles of the existing system, they are all, we have developed an algorithm. If you give the design parameters, it automatically gives a load profile. And the torque speed characteristics of the BLDC motor should meet this profile. This is the speed and this is the torque. So that is where the starting point of the design of the motor is. We begin here. These are the motors. Some pictures I have taken. Actuators. This is an open BLDC motor. There is the stator and there is a permanent magnet rotor. This is having a casing on top of the magnets because this is a relatively high-speed motor. These are all surface mounted. There is the stator which is having encasement at both ends. This is the LVDT. This is the servo controller which houses the processor, servo part as well as the inverter is housed in this. A few pictures of the actuator. Motor specifications, I will not go into the details, but this is a 9.1 9 kilowatt motor, 150 volts DC is what we have designed. Now we do an FEM analysis to see the temperature rise in various parts of the motor. The red one is showing the maximum temperature rise. This is the stator. This is the stator and this is the rotor. You can see the magnets. The air gap is roughly around 0.3 to 0.5 mm for a 150 mm diameter motor. I think he is going to cover it and he is speaking. The coil orientation, this is a star connected motor for all practical purposes. Double coil for redundancy. Some pictures shown here. Morning I was sitting with Satish Kumar Garu and I saw a small model in one corner, something like this. Any one of you know what this is? I'll not ask him. Have you done an experiment on something like this in your electrical engineering lab? What does it do? Huh? What does it do? You have many parameters. The entire motor you can test using this. Many things, all of you know that. I don't have to test your knowledge or something. It's not the question. But this particular equipment, a small model, is there in his lab. This is the conventional motor, DC motor. It's a commutator. It is having surface winding. Even the stator is wound. I meant to say even the rotor is wound. There are carbon brushes prone to maintenance. This is the brushless DC motor, permanent magnet. Stator is wound. The commutation is electronic. This is the electronic switches, X bridge switching. You can see an animation how the rotor is moving as there is a flux, as the flux is rotating. A brief description about the NDFEB magnets. I have talked about all these things. The operating temperature is 180 degrees and the Curie temperature is 340. You know the difference between operating temperature and Curie temperature in a permanent magnet? I will briefly tell you what the difference is. Up to 180 degrees, its performance is guaranteed for whatever parameters are specified here. Beyond 180, there is a degradation. It doesn't lose its magnetic properties permanently. They degrade, but then recover once the temperature comes back to room temperature. But at Curie temperature, it loses its properties permanently beyond Curie temperature. It's a point of no return. Am I right, sir? So again, a cross section of the motor. BH curve. I will skip this because you know the difference between a soft core material and a permanent magnet. BH curve, everybody knows that. The second quadrant is very important. We operate mostly here in the design. This is what it shows, that as you increase the temperature, the width of the BH curve goes down, becomes narrower. Servo controller, I have talked about it already. This is what is the brief diagram which shows how the system operates. This is the stator winding, a star connected winding. You have got Hall sensors to pick up the rotor position, which forms a feedback element to the motor controller. And the error signal is the one which comes from the autopilot. And there is the digital diagram, wherein you have the motor controller IC and the processor. Processor is this one, 21062 Sharp ADSP. The specifications of the MOSFET. The safe operating area is what is most important. And that is the basis of our design. X bridge. The sequence of computation is given here. Servo controller, some pictures. LVDT pictures. You know what is LVDT? I don't have to explain what it is. Had it been other than electrical engineering group, probably it would have been necessary. DC-DC converters we use in large numbers. Topology is, it is an isolated DC-DC converter, either a push-pull or a flyback converter. Batteries I have talked about. We have secondary batteries, primary batteries. These are all silver oxide zinc batteries, but now we use the lithium batteries, lithium thermal batteries. Then once the actuator is designed, assembled, then we have various tests that the actuator goes through. We have sinusoidal command test, step response test. We have the velocity test, which is a triangle wave. We have the frequency response test, which is shown here, which gives the bandwidth of the system. We have a stall load test, which gives the power or the force that the actuator can deliver. Then we actually summarize the results, and a review team goes through it and approves the design, which enables it to be made in numbers. Then we have a real test which happens on ground. An actuator, a real rocket motor is lined up. We have a facility in Chhattisgarh where we take the rocket motor, put it on ground, strap it, put the actuators, and then go through an actual firing test. I'll show some figures here. This is the test setup. You can see the rocket motor firing. It is strapped to the ground, and then the nozzle is flexed like this. And this is the sequence of commands, 2-step commands. Then we have a staircase command. We have a large single sinusoid, frequency response here, then a small sinusoid, and that is the sequence of test. Some other pictures, we do some integrated tests in our hangar at RCI. And following that, we have some more advanced tests. And this is the stage where the entire missile testing is over and the missile is ready either to be sent for launch at the launch site close to Balasore. You already know it is called the Wheelers Island. Now it is renamed as Abdul Kalam Island, about 25 nautical miles away from Balasore coast. This is an actual picture taken from the launch pad. Agni 3 missile is integrated, and few minutes from this point of time, the launch computer takes over. It goes through an auto launch sequence. First stage is ignited and it goes to the trajectory. And at the touchdown point, we have two ships, 25 nautical miles apart. They have visual observing equipment. They also have telemetry and transponder equipment to track the re-entry vehicle, and they capture the terminal point, the point at which there is a flash which comes. And that's how we come to know that the mission is successful. Thank you. Any questions? Another 2 minutes because I have overshot my time limit quite a bit. If you have any quick questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll hand over to the session to the next speaker.
Cover it.
The talk is going to be on the topic emerging trends in renewable energy and electrical vehicles. Easy to know that the speaker is the elder son of our previous professor, A.D. Rajkumar sir. So nice to have you, sir.